What's up, guys, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the NeoVintage podcast. I'm Jabro, and I'm here with
Steve. Hope everyone's doing well out there.
And for you guys who have never seen the show before, we're just two guys that like to talk over the biggest stories in gaming, but we're doing a bit of a special show today. We're doing a spoiler cast dedicated to God of War Ragnarok. Really excited to get into that. But before we get into that, I do want to start with what we've been playing. So, Steve, what you been playing?
Yeah, ending off the year here, I'm not playing too much new. Still playing two main games, really. Still playing Crisis Core Reunion, Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core, the remake. And I'm in a weird spot with it, where I kind of want to I want to experience the story and kind of get through it. That old style PSP version of it, because it is more of a remaster than a remake. That day-to-day thing where after every mission they send you back to HQ and you gotta talk to a few people, hit up the cupboards, and it's in a weird spot where it's I kind of just wish I didn't have to do that stuff and just did the actual gameplay. But it's hard to be rough on it when I know it's just a remaster in very almost literal sense, because a lot of that stuff has not aged greatly. But then once I get hit with a cool cutscene, and the main gameplay is actually really fun, but it's that stuff that's stopping me from actually playing the game in between that kind of just bugs me. So I'm waiting for a time where I have, and probably this weekend, we're recording this right before the new year, so I have some time off, and hopefully I can just play in bigger chunks to get bigger sections out of the game out the way. But the other game that another reason I haven't done too much is because I'm playing a lot of this, and I'm playing a lot of Marvel Midnight Suns.
Oh.
Now, I know I talked a little bit about it before, that I was playing it, and I was having some issues with the cloud save, because they, for some reason, shut the cloud save off from Steam Deck to PC. And in a very PC way, they updated the game for Steam Deck, and now it doesn't run on Steam Deck at all. So I've been playing mainly only on PC because it doesn't run on Steam Deck anymore, and the cloud save never really transferred. But now I'm a good, just shy maybe of 20 hours in there, and I'm really loving this game. It's just such a fantastic game. I still have some issues with it technically. The models look terrible. I got to the point where Spider-Man takes off his outfit, and I know we've seen hundreds and thousands of iterations of Peter Parker by now, and this is by far the most generic looking.
I've seen that scene. It looks crazy. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Yeah, that's my issue mainly with this game, is that everyone outside of their, even the people who aren't in suits, outside of their suits, look so bad. Like they took a very generic AI character creator and used it. But yeah, when he comes out with his little blue hoodie and he's just very generic, it's it's a struggle. And it's the same with Iron Man. It's the same with a lot of these characters. When they're not suited up in their style, they stick out. But so most of these characters, sometimes it just really doesn't hit. But there's other times where Wolverine is introduced. And that's not a spoiler. He's on the cover, I think. He's introduced. He has a really cool style. I like the identity to him. So in that way, and most of the time, they're really on point with these characters and who they are, how they act, and how they interact with each other. And other times, it just misses the point, where I think some of the voice acting is still kind of rough. But what they're trying to say, in a sense, I try to almost ignore the voice and I read the captions like if I'm reading a comic book, and it's great. It's some of the greatest stuff. I don't know if the gameplay would necessarily speak to you, but in a world that you had time to watch some of these interactions and just the storyline itself, those YouTube videos that's just compilation of all the cutscenes, and you'll have a great time. The gameplay may not sell at you exactly. It really won me over because I'm playing it more like a card game, which is really cool. Like I said, it's not grid based, so that sort of minute constant of XCOM of you use your turn to either attack or move. You don't have that here. You can move a certain amount of time every turn. You always have 3 card plays. You have 2 redraws, so you have your options. And I'm playing it on an easier mode because I'm not a expert at these super tactical games, so I'm having fun with it. I love that they're spending a lot of time with these characters. Especially some of these. In the comics, the Midnight Suns, you have Magic and a few of these other characters that we haven't seen. I think some of these characters may have appeared in that weird MCU spinoff they did on Hulu, but it's cool that they're showing some cool aspects of these characters. Instead of the other Ghost Rider, we have Robbie as Ghost Rider, so we have the newer iteration of Ghost Rider, and it's just really fun, and the story is just getting it's starting to get darker and darker with Lilith and what's going on with Scarlet Witch and the mystical stuff, and it's the stuff that I was kind of hoping the MCU was gonna go in, and they're actually going in a weird nebulous direction with that. So it's cool to experience it all. So I'm having a lot of fun. Even some of the stuff that I didn't think I would like. Sort of just walking around the mansion and interacting with each other, and not all the side missions hit. There's a side mission where you have to throw a birthday party. Not the best. It's not the most fun thing to do, but there's other missions where they start explaining some backstory between Blade and Captain Marvel, which in certain comic books, I'm sure in certain comic books they are sort of shipped together, paired together. So there's some cool throwbacks to like some very deep Easter eggs, which I really appreciate. So that's where I'm really spending a lot of my time, and especially over the holidays and stuff, when I get a chance, I sit for a couple hours, try to knock some out, because it's overall a good package. I just wish the game was just slightly more polished. I wish there was a little less popping. I wish there was some less chugging. I had to bring this game down a little bit more, just because it starts to chug sometimes. Just opening a portal, which happens constantly, just sometimes puts my PC in a state of disarray and doesn't know what to do. I've only had one hard crash, but all in all, I think it's a really fun game. I just wish it was delivered a little bit more with a punch, but I'm loving everything else about it. So that's all I've been playing. What have you been up to?
Yeah, it's been kind of a weird time for me where I've kind of paused. Once I finished God of War, I kind of paused Crisis Core. It's not that I dislike it at all. Obviously, it's damn near a classic. So I love Crisis Core, but I've kind of just wasn't feeling playing it at that moment. So I kind of paused it for a second, and I was looking for something to kind of kill some time on. So I tried High on Life. You see, like, there's moments that I think kill me, and like I die laughing, like the Mac and Cheese Brothers thing. It's so stupid, but it kills me.
Yeah,
I think that's really funny. But then there are moments where I'm kind of like, whatever. And I didn't make it that far into it. Actually, Alyssa beat the whole thing, so I kind of got like a whole small glimpses into later in the game. I'm still probably gonna bank some more out of it. It makes me super nauseous when I play for some reason. I have really bad like motion sickness, and it's set off by some games worse than others, depending on kind of like motion blur and how much I can turn off. And how much I can enjoy and change. A lot of games these days with the accessibility settings, you can turn off like motion bobbing and stuff like that and different effects. This game's not the best with that. Like, they have a constant reticle, which is nice, and that helps a lot. But there are certain things that I just can't turn off that I feel like are like making me a little bit more sick. So I have to play it in really small chunks. Which has kind of cut me from being able to get a lot deeper. I see what you mean about the humor. It's definitely one of those things that unless you're like a super fan of Justin Roiland's humor, it will get old really fast, like very fast, like first hour fast. But because again, it the best way I can describe it is it feels like those episodes of Rick and Morty where it's the commercial compilations where it's just nonstop improv commercials. That's kind of what it feels like, where like you do have this overwhelming narrative, but every time you're speaking to somebody, it feels like they don't know necessarily what they're going to say next, which again is part of the humor. It's this stuttering, like I don't know where he's going to go with it type thing. That again is funny at times, and then other times I'm kind of like, all right, well, I'm not 15, so maybe this is not like hitting, I'm not the target demo of this. But yeah, it's cool. Like, I don't think it's, like, great. I think I like some of the Doom elements. I'm surprised how, like, Doom-inspired it seems to be at times. And so I can appreciate some of the different traversal tools and some of the combat tools. But overall, like, I'm not, like, blown away by it. It's basically giving me exactly what I anticipated giving, which is, like, a fine first-person shooter. Like, it's cool. But yeah, I played that, and I was like, all right, that's cool, but I want something to really sink into the holidays that I don't even have to think about. And so I've been meaning to go back to Skyrim for a long time. And so I just been playing Skyrim. Like, that's like all I've been playing, really, to be honest. And yeah, I'm having fun with it. It's so there's so many versions that have come out that I don't exactly know what version it is. I think it's the second newest, because it's on the PlayStation Premium, the Plus Premium service. So it's not the newest that added some small DLC things. It's the version right before that, I think, where they ported Skyrim to the newest consoles, the PS5 and stuff like that. I believe it's that version. So it's basically the nicest version of Skyrim you could play with small differences of like different content that they offer. That doesn't really matter. And yeah, it's Skyrim, so I'm enjoying it. But I don't have to speak much to the game itself because if you pretty much everybody who's gonna play Skyrim at this point has played Skyrim, and everybody knows whether they like it or not. It's still a good time. It's still a glitchy mess sometimes, but overall, it's a fun world to get lost in. One thing I am surprised by is how much that world holds up in terms of just the sheer size in relation to content. I still think is very impressive for what is like 2011 or something like that.
The original release, yeah.
Where I'm not exaggerating here. You can walk almost continuously for like 30 minutes, an hour, and like be in the middle of nowhere, and there's still like weird small things you bump into out there. And that's what I can appreciate is like, even if you like are playing the story and you're like, all right, I'm over it, you can pick any section on the map, maybe like in a region that you haven't been to yet, and just walk in that direction and you'll find something to do. And so I can appreciate the fact that like it's a big world, and at times it's like empty in certain areas, but I think it's like purposefully empty, and I think it like makes sense. When it's empty, it's like when you're like literally in the middle of nowhere on a trail heading to another major marker. It makes sense why there might not be like a ton out there. But generally, it's really solid world design for something that at this point is 11 years old. There are games coming out these days that I think do a lot less with their world. So I can appreciate that Skyrim in that regard still really holds up, and the story's still a lot of fun, and the combat's still very clunky. This is actually the first playthrough that I'm playing through completely third person. I've always been a first person Skyrim person, and I was like, let me just try it, because it actually that was like one thing I really like playing, like ESO like that. And I was like, I've never actually played like Skyrim proper like that. So I've been playing it like that, and it holds up enough. It looks ridiculous when you're fighting and moving around, but the whole game is kind of ridiculous. So yeah, I've just been sinking a lot of time into that because I think it's like the perfect time sink game that has no real stakes. I've beat it before, and it's one of those games you can get lost in like side quests, and there's no real like penalty to that, like other than maybe difficulty that you might want to like hold off and do some stuff and get a little stronger before you handle that. Other than that, there are no blockers narratively to a lot of different storylines, so you can just like go to different places, do different things, and you don't actually really need to do it in any particular order. It's not like they block off certain sections of the map and it's like, oh, you need to be level 20 to do this. Not really. It's kind of like things kind of scale. So if you're like over it and you're in like, let's say, the imperial capital, and you're like, I want to go all the way into the mountains, you can do that. Like there's nothing really blocking you from doing that. So that's one thing I really like about it, and I think it's kind of like the perfect time sink, I think, for right now, where I'm kind of like in a weird limbo mode where it's like I'm not really trying to play a lot of the things I have. I kind of just want to like kill time. I'm like falling into my most comfortable games right now. So I've been playing a lot of Vampire Survivor on the Steam Deck, and Skyrim here. For some reason, I was playing Shadow for a while, Shadow the Hedgehog, on PS2. I don't know why. Maybe because it's just been a while. I don't have that game. I've just never bought a copy of it, so I haven't played it in a really long time, and I don't know what happened. I was like, I actually kind of just want to like emulate that and just see how... Not see how it runs, because I knew it was going to run fine, but like just see how that holds up. And that game's nuts. Like that game's so weird. I love it though. I love how like edgy and ridiculous it is. And I've been playing a little bit of that. So yeah, all in all, it's been kind of like a weird, like I'm playing old stuff type thing. But I have had my eyes on Midnight Suns, so that might be the next game that I kind of jump into and give it a shot. I don't know what the price is for it, so hopefully I don't have to like pay too much for it. But I'm intrigued.
Yeah, no, I think it's an interesting thing. The gameplay will either get you or it won't get you, and that's the thing. I don't think there's a big learning curve. I think it's a pretty simple concept, but once you start getting through it, then you pretty much realize how to do it, how to play it. And again, I'm playing it on, I don't know if I'm on the easiest mode, but there's like a straight up, just they call it a story mode, story difficulty, which I know one other person who's playing it, and he's playing it on that. He goes, oh yeah, I like never die. He goes, but I'm just here for the experience. But I also heard like if you want that challenge, it's there. So it's an interesting game.
Yeah, it's what. Yeah, I want to play obviously mostly for the story. And card games are like kind of hit or miss for me. Like some of them I've liked, what is it? Slay the Spire. I thought was pretty cool,
Yeah.
and I guess that counts as a card game, kind of. Yeah, it's got cards. But then like you got like a thing that's like Hearthstone that is too much for me. So like I can't play like the full stuff. But I can definitely like mess with some of the lighter ones. So if it's not super intense and not super tactical, I think I should be fine. Like I don't,
So.
yeah, I don't mind almost like a chain of memories, like tied to my actions immediately type thing. It's more so like when I need to hold, like I'm like draw a card and then it's like use this trap card and I can't do all that. That's too crazy. but if I can, just kind of experience a story and that's just kind of how the combat evolves, I can deal with that because I've dealt with games in the past that I didn't love the gameplay for, but like got a good Marvel story out of it. Like, obviously there was Ultimate Alliance 2, for example, once upon a time. Not the greatest gameplay, but decent enough to get like a fun enough story if you want to see people interact. So I'm assuming at the very worst it'll be like that for me.
Yeah, probably.
But all right, so that's what I've been playing. Now we can get into the reason why we're here, Steve. It's the God of War Ragnarok Spoilercast. We've been hinting at this for quite a while because I've wanted to kind of go into deeper detail about our thoughts with this game. So we're going to separate this into a lot of different sections so you can kind of jump around as needed. We're going to start off with just really top level overall spoiler free thoughts. And that will be a quick section. Then immediately we can get into our bigger thoughts with spoilers. We'll talk about separately the story, the gameplay, the characters, and then we'll have 2 sections at the end that we'll kind of wait till we get there to kind of go into all that. But top level, Steve, without any spoilers, kind of what is your general feelings towards this game?
Yeah, in general, I mean, this is what a AAA game should feel like. When it hits, you have everyone talking about it. You have everyone dying to play it. I mean, there was some small controversies leading up to just, from the initial, release date, which I think everyone from the get-go called that it wasn't going to hit, to the delay, to that time where, like, the trailer date leaked and they didn't, and a bunch of little nonsense. But when you have so much hype and so much discussion coming out to a game and have a game deliver on that, I think is really cool. I think when you take a formula that's pretty mastered in the first God of War, and able to refine it, give it the tweaks that you want, because it's really easy to mess it up. It's very easy to, they could have added weapons that were no good or some reason screwed up the feeling of it. Now, did I expect that at all? No, not from Santa Monica at all. But without obviously getting into it too deep right now, I think in general, when you have these characters go through what they've gone through, seeing an iteration of them a couple years back, it's been, for some people they didn't do a replay. For some people they played the 2018 and this is the first time they've gone back to it. So to have those characters, to have those characters grow in certain aspects off screen and see who they are now because of what they went through in God of War 2018 and what they're preparing themselves to go through is just magnificent. It just doesn't feel like there's missing a part. This is what a sequel should be, a growing in every aspect. Is it perfect? No. I have 2 main issues with the game, but in every other sense though, this was a game where I couldn't wait. When for some reason my daughter went through a phase that week where she was waking me up at 3 a.m. No problem. I put a pot of coffee on there and I turned up God of War Ragnarok, and I had no problem because it was a game that kept calling to me. It's weird because that's pretty much one of the only games that did that this year. There's a few other ones that I really got through, but this is one that it didn't feel like a chore to get through. It's something I did naturally play. It's something that kept calling me through. I didn't feel burnt out by it. I was worried because I had the opposite effect, and not to barter on it, I had the opposite effect with Horizon sequel where I just didn't want to play it, and I've come to the conclusion now that just Horizon's not for me. I don't like that game. Not that I don't like the game, I just don't think that world and everything speaks to me right now. It took me forever to get to the first one. It's not my time for it. But God of War was the exact opposite, where it's like I sat down with it and I just wanted to keep playing it. So, I mean, it was our game of the year. We gave it our game of the year here on NeoVintage, for overall many reasons. We talked about that last time. And pretty much this whole spoiler section, this whole spoiler cast is going to be why we did it. So overall, just what a great game. Not perfect, but in many ways lived up to what it needed to be. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, overall, if there's a kind of like one phrase I can kind of put on it, is that they stuck the landing. And that's one thing I didn't really expect. I mean, going into it, so obviously Sony Santa Monica, incredibly talented team. We all knew that. So I had no doubt about the level of polish this game was going to have. I think my apprehension was, I was concerned that God of War 2018 was kind of this lightning in a bottle, like right time, right franchise. It had been some time since we got, a brand new God of War game, and they came back and it was a whole new vibe and a whole new thing. It was fresh. It was a new idea. And my concern was I don't know if they can do that again. Now that we know that world, we know these characters, and they're continuing a narrative with a new director. There was a lot of moving parts there that were suggesting that we might get a really polished game that really falls short of everybody's hopes and expectations. And I don't think that happened at all, thankfully. Kind of top level, I think they did a great job. The game was great. This is, ultimately kind of what I was waiting for all year. I was looking for that kind of high level AAA Sony first party game. And obviously Last of Us Remake, great game, but again, that's a remake, it's a different thing. This is the game I had been waiting for, that I was kind of really hoping in some ways that Horizon was, a major sequel to, a game from 2 to 3 years ago prior. And this one, or no, even more than that, but I think they absolutely killed it. Everything from, and we'll get into it, but the story, the gameplay, the characters, all these things really did a great job. And I think this game not only stuck the landing and followed up what was great about the first one, but really made its own way, where I think in many ways, in good ways, this game differentiates itself dramatically from the first game. And it has its own kind of feel and identity, even though it's kind of continuing an existing narrative. And I think there are great things that it does to evolve some of the existing characters that we know about. And I came out of the other side of God of War Ragnarok just almost more impressed than I was when I finished the first God of War. The first God of War, I was like, wow, I mean, that was incredible. I didn't expect that to be so good. And Ragnarok, I finished and I was like, I can't believe you guys were able to fix this, because again, this was once upon a time supposed to be a trilogy, and the fact that they were actually able to kind of wrap this saga up into, and again, not to get into spoilers, but they managed to actually make this work, is kind of like a testament to the talent of the writing and the dev over there at Sony Santa Monica. So shout out to them. And overall, highly recommended to anybody in the PlayStation ecosystem. If you have a PlayStation and you're looking for something to play and you don't have this game already, I think you're very missing out. Definitely check this game out. And the cool thing about it is, they've done a good job with the availability of the first one, so that's readily available. I say do your homework, play the first one, then jump into Ragnarok, and I seriously doubt. Yeah, I could see you playing it all the way through and not getting super burnt out, because I think they do a great job of giving you those kind of rest points to kind of decompress and kind of do things at your own pace. So, yeah, definitely big thumbs up from me.
Absolutely.
So now, spoiler thoughts with a little bit more specificity, if you'd like. What do you think, and what thoughts you got?
Yeah, again, like I was saying, the game delivered in so many ways everything I wanted, and there's no way to spoil everything in this game at once. So, but there's two sections that I have to discuss, and the first section which is the first time I believe it's the first time that you take over Atreus. And you go into I forget where you go. I'm terrible at some of these realm names, but you go when you meet and I always screw up the pronunciation of her name.
Angerboda?
Angerboda.
Yeah.
So it's the first time you meet her, and with that, the issue with that is, so it's the first time you get Atreus, right? And we kind of knew this was going to happen, right? Atreus is a little bit older. He's taking a lot of lessons from Kratos. Let's see what some of that translates into gameplay-wise. No, we're going to put you on a yak and have a bunch of dialogue told to you while you're collecting a fruit here. And there's some combat, very few combat, with very weak enemies here and there. And it's not anything against her character. That's not the issue. It's what you were doing is nothing. basically for an hour and a half, there's a bunch of nothing, and then at the last couple minutes, she's like explores about the marbles that Atreus has and the spirits that are trapped inside of them. The giants are gone, but they're not like dead. And it's like, whoa, why is all this all of a sudden just being just thrown at me when you spent forever talking about flowers and paint for no reason? So that's my big hold. And every time I've ever mentioned the game prior to our spoiler cast, that's the scene I'm always talking about. And it's pretty much on a consensus that chapter, it was just definitely broke the pacing with such a strong opening in the game. When you have, within half an hour, you have Thor in your house, you have Odin in your house, you have these amazing cutscenes and battles. You have that great thing that I didn't, when that first battle with Thor, you have a quick time event and you think you succeeded the quick time event, but you fail it, only for Thor to revive you and take the loading screen away, and you can see like, whoa, that after such an amazing beginning like that, you have this just slow walking simulator where you're just walking, and some of the discussions are cool, and that's where I felt like the pacing was my biggest issue with the game. Is just you had these awesome moments, and then you would have these just bubblings of nothingness kind of happening, and I think it's a mixed bag. I will never know why it is that it is. I don't know what was cut, what was moved, why they decided that was the way it needed to be done, when I think the pacing of the first God of War was just constant. You had this one that was just had this huge dip, and then luckily it made me worried for the next time you took over Atreus. I was like, oh no, but luckily it turned to a different thing. It wasn't this super walk. It was more of what you were expecting with Atreus gameplay, which he plays significantly different. If you button mash, it's the same as Kratos, but you have to play him significantly different than Kratos because he's not just this brute force. So my only other issue is, obviously, this is God of War Ragnarok. My other main issue with the games, in full spoiler, was Ragnarok. I think it was, more of a fizzle than it was an epic sort of like hit, because there's a lot of stuff that's happening, as Ragnarok should, it should be a bunch of chaos, but you have everything going on with the world serpent. You got all this story about how the world serpent, which in some mythology Loki gives birth to, well, in a sense gives birth to. In this they did thank God they did a very good way of doing it in God of War Ragnarok, with him putting the soul in a snake that turns the world serpent. But the big thing that happened in the lore, and they discussed it in the first one, is how his fight with Thor in Ragnarok, he took a hit so hard that it teleported him back in time. That happens in Ragnarok, but it happens way off screen in the back. So it's like the wrong times were being focused on in Ragnarok, where I think just so much was going on that the right stuff wasn't focused. That's such a throwaway thing that if you blink, you won't see that happening in the background, where Thor hits it and then boom, he's gone, and and it's a cycle. So I just think that is where the other issue was, where it's, I don't know, you think Ragnarok, you think big, you think God of War, you think about those endings to the other God of War games, so you think back to the ending to God of War 2018, and you have this one that kind of ends too quickly, in a sense. It's just like, here, spend 45 minutes running through trenches fighting these enemies you've been fighting, to finally then catch up to do the Thor fight, another Thor fight, to do, obviously, want to go hand on hand with Odin. So I just don't, and that's, I guess, more personal taste. I just don't think it delivered exactly where it was. I don't think it was like this grand firework. Like I said, it was like a sort of sizzle, which was cool. I love these characters. I love seeing them all interact with each other in that ending. But it just didn't feel like an end game sort of, not an end game Marvel, but like this big end game hit. So those were my sort of things. Besides that, I think everything else in the game was really well done. I think everything with Kratos as a character, learning to let go of Atreus, one sense losing Atreus, to being able to let Atreus go, I think was done really well. So, full spoiler, I mean, I could sit here and talk for hours, but full spoiler, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, kind of like, high level, because obviously we'll have time to go into the characters and story. I actually have similar thoughts. Obviously, great game, very positive about it. I have some issues with, I don't know if it's necessarily a pacing issue. I think it's a little like, back and forth and back and forth and go to Sindri's camp and then go to this world and then go back and where is Atreus now? Oh, he's over there. Play as Atreus. Go back. Now I'm Kratos doing this thing with her. After a while, I was like, okay, I think they've kind of made me appreciate God of War 1's linearity a little bit more. And again, I think I love the way that they incorporated a more kind of open structure there. I think they embed the side content a lot better in this game than the first one, where the first one you really do kind of like bang through the story and then it's kind of on you, go to the other realms, do the other things if you'd like, where in this one, like it embeds quests almost like a traditional open world game, which I can appreciate, but yeah, after a while, the kind of back and forth nature of it was a little bit much at times. One big thing for me was the Ragnarok thing. I've thought about that a lot. When I first kind of played through the game, I also was kind of let down by Ragnarok, and it was less so that I think they kind of failed in delivering a compelling kind of like climax, and more so the build-up to what actually happened didn't really match up. You have this entire game and all these prophecies and all these characters and players and all these twists and turns, and it's going to this, and how do we stop Ragnarok all the way to, okay, now let's make Ragnarok happen, to the point, and then, it kind of happens, and in many ways, I guess I was just so surprised how literal some things were, where it was like a literal siege on on Odin's palace, like a literal like soldiers going around, which was fine. Like I understood to some extent that would be happening, and you have the giant dude in the background smashing everything, and that's cool. And then next thing you know, you're fighting Odin. I'm like, oh, okay, here we go, like the big thing, and you fight Odin, and then you beat Odin, and I'm like, oh, okay. That didn't go where I thought it was. I don't know if I was expecting like a Power Rangers Odin turns big type situation. Not necessarily all that, but I was actually kind of surprised. And again, it wasn't easy for them to take down Odin. That's not what I'm saying, but more so like I was surprised of like how literal, like, yeah, we just killed Odin, sealed him away, and that was that.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. I expected maybe some other major development, and one major thing that I was maybe expecting and maybe was a little let down by, but understand why they made that choice, is some of the plots that they are obviously heading into with whatever exists outside of this universe that Kratos inhabits, with that whole mask situation and ultimate knowledge and what is out there, and what is drawing them in, and what did Odin see, or what did he try to see when he looked in, and what would he have seen if he looked in with that mask. All of those things they really didn't actually address at all. They really kind of held it close to their chest, and is obviously something that they're holding off for. So part of me is like actually really excited about the idea that, like, okay, so they're not playing all their cards just yet. They're very clearly, and again, we have a whole section we can talk about the future of the franchise, but that was one thing that I was like surprised that they kept it very locked into the established narrative of this is how this world kind of not ends, but builds to this giant Ragnarok thing that has been prophesized. That's what the game is about. Everything else that they kind of introduced as themes of like outside of maybe where Kratos was at one point, the whole kind of Greece and the Pantheon stuff, all of that, outside of this Norse world that exists, there is something out there outside of all of that, that at least Odin was trying to harness and tap into. What that is, if it comes back in any substantive way, is unclear. But yeah, they made it very clear that they're not really going to be addressing all of that. The moment that Atreus kind of smashed that mask, that was the end of that, at least for now. And I thought that was very interesting, because that was like a super compelling thing, because it makes me wonder, like, if you have these other realms that exist, that let's say the Egyptian Kemetic gods exist somewhere out there, and you have the Greek pantheon once upon a time that existed in this little like sphere of universe. there's something outside of all of that, maybe some organizing structure that I wonder how that works, and how that can play a major role to whatever Kratos decides to do next and where he decides to go next, and whether that plays a role at all. But that's just kind of, me speculating, and me was kind of hoping that they kind of like let it all out towards the end of this game, where they definitely held some stuff back, because it's clear that they have big and bold plans for the future of God of War. But overall, I liked it quite a bit. I thought the story was really, really great. My favorite things about the story are actually completely divorced from the most immediate, like, Odin tier Ragnarok stuff. And actually, what is really compelling to me is when you look at the themes that they're playing around in this game. When you look at the kind of just general maturation and of Atreus and what it means to be your own person and make your own decisions, and autonomy, what it means for Kratos to be a father, trying to really not make the mistakes that he feel like maybe in some ways were made with his life, and or at least the path he was going down, and like, how does he keep Atreus from becoming him? In some ways, Atreus' life has been so different than Kratos that you'd think on the surface, like, hey, there's no way he can become like Kratos. But then I think Kratos got these glimpses of, like, if I continue parenting this way, it's going to make him this kind of closed off, emotionally stunted individual that in some ways Kratos was for so long. And it's so interesting how it kind of plays into themes of, like, generational traumas and how things kind of translate to each other, and what you went through. If you don't take the time to address yourself, you can pass on to your kid. Those themes like that, I think, are the most compelling part, and we have time to get into that later. But yeah, that's what I would say, kind of in a spoiler way, where it's like, I think God of War Ragnarok is actually strongest when you think about it in relation to character development and character relations, rather than the most literal narrative that's happening with, Sindri and Grok and all that stuff. But yeah, those are my kind of overall spoilery thoughts. So I guess we can go deeper into the story now, if you'd like. So this one kind of kicks off exactly where the previous one left off, with kind of Thor popping up at Kratos and Atreus' house. And then from that point onwards, the game really kind of starts with a bang, with that amazing meeting between Thor and Odin and Kratos. What did you think about the overall kind of story from, like, a strictly narrative perspective of this game?
Yeah, I always thought it'd be really good. I'll be honest, I was nervous when the game starts. Obviously, you have your issue with Freya, you kill her son, and everything that happens. But then we get, the post cutscene, which was God of War 2018, with Thor arriving. Unhoods himself, talks, and I was like, okay, wow, this is starting good. Then you get the Odin reveal right off the bat. I said, whoa, I'm not even 2 hours into this game, and I've got Kratos, Thor, Odin, Atreus, and Mimir, mouthing off in the back. I was like, whoa. I said, they have to be very confident in their story to give us everyone up front, in a big way. They're like, all right, here's what Freya's been, here's Thor, here's Odin, here's what he wants, and I'm like, wow, this is definitely something special. If they think not saving the Odin, not reveal, because I think we saw a screenshot of him before, or whatever it is, but his introduction was just right off. I didn't expect that. I don't think anyone expected within 2 hours of the game starting, you were gonna have everyone, have this meeting already. With what you did in the first God of War 2018. I mean, you killed Thor's sons. You had these other. So it's just like all this stuff, and it's like, oh my god, this is all happening right off the bat, and it doesn't. It changes, and Odin always, especially in most versions of Odin, he's always not a trickster per se, but always has a secret agenda. And this one he does. Obviously, you mentioned a lot about this all-knowing, and what's the sliver, the glows with the connection to the mask and everything like that. So story-wise, I think they were smart on capitalizing on the characters we knew. If you think about it, there's maybe 2, 4, 6, maybe like 10, 12 characters really that stick throughout the game, and I think they delivered a lot with them. Even Brock and Sindri, which I think were important in 2018. I don't think they were in the foreground like they are in this game. I mean, to the point where, again, so we're having full spoiler. I mean, Brock's death is a big changer. Yeah. In many things, especially with Atreus, which is his growth is what we thought we'd be focusing on, but that's a big thing. I think that's a big theme I saw, which was growing from a situation. Especially when Sindri talks about what he had to go through with Brock's first death, years and years ago. Sindri becomes a completely different person after that. Atreus tries to recoil himself and it's like, no, let's go hunting, let's go back to what we used to do, to the point where Kratos has to be like, it's okay to a change with Kratos, who's like very close yourself to emotions, and he's in the point where he's different. He tells his son, you have to feel for this, because Atreus does have this big deep relationship with Brock and Sindri, and how close he was to them. So that's when I look at this story, it's like, though it's in a on paper basic story, guys trying to stop Ragnarok has to happen. It is what it is. But it's the characters in the story that are so different. It's the stuff of forgiveness and change is what I really took away from this. I don't think there's one character in this game that didn't change drastically. Through whether it's through death, through life, through discovery, through forgiveness. If you think about what Freya had to go through, at one point I didn't know how long I could trust Freya for a long time. I said she can change at any moment, but she has this big issue, especially with, and I kind of wish it wasn't done, not off screen, but it's done while you're playing and Freya is your partner. At one point where she comes at Kratos like, how would you know what it is to lose your children, and Kratos discusses, listen, he wears the ashes of his daughter and his wife, and he, not only did he lose his daughter and wife, he was the reason they died. So it gets deeper into that, and she starts to see a different side of Kratos, and Kratos is opening up. That's, I don't think, something he discussed at all, I think, in the 2018 version.
No, not at all.
I don't think at all. Obviously, we know it's, his skin is white, covered in ash, so we know that, but that's a huge reveal. That's something, who knows if he's ever mentioned, he must have talked to Trace about that, but it's just something that he's telling someone like Freya, who he talks about constantly. He's like, that he still didn't see her as an enemy, and that's really what just stuck to me with this game, is what situations could cause someone to change or not change. Even though some of it, again, at the end of the game feels rushed. Thor, all of a sudden after his, and I say Kratos has a Naruto speech and convinces Thor to be a good guy, in a sense, is how I describe it to everybody. He had a Naruto speech. He had an anime, plot progression there. To have Thor finally be like, maybe you're right, maybe Odin, I should turn against Odin, and then boom, Thor's dead as well. So the story did not go where I think it was going. I thought, I'm not sure what I even expected. I tried not to even pre-emphasize what was going to happen in this one, because, again, we knew it was going to lead to Ragnarok for a long time. It's where Norse mythology goes and ends, is with the Ragnarok, with the death of so many. So how did you really just overall reflect on that story?
Yeah, it's really interesting to me as well, because when we got God of War 2018, you see this kind of somewhat evolved, or at least trying to evolve, version of Kratos. There's all those like Dad of War jokes and all that and stuff like that. But I think that you really do get to see some of the changes in this game, where this is a guy who really does have this immense reluctancy towards going back to war, which is so interesting to see, especially considering the fact that for the first 3-4 games in the God of War franchise, he brings the war to people, let alone, being thrust into an existing situation and doing everything in his power to remove him and his immediate family away from that. And so that's what I think is so interesting. The story, my general thoughts about the story kind of go along with what I spoke about earlier, about this whole idea of the themes and interplay between the characters being kind of the most compelling portions of that. The Ragnarok portion is very interesting. One major thing that I was curious about was, what how is this going to roll out in terms of this, Kratos' involvement with the whole Ragnarok process without him mindlessly killing every god available like he did previously? Because I know that he's not going to want to do that. You know what I mean? But I know that when it's all said and done, some of these gods are going to die. I know that to be the case. And I love the way that they kind of played that out, where that's one thing I think maybe people don't talk about enough, is the tremendous restraint of Kratos in this game. Like when it's time to turn up, he turns up, no doubt about that. But you have to think about like the Freya situation. In an early point of his life, she would be beyond dead. You know what I mean? Continually attacking him with his son there. And again, she's no slouch. It's not like he could just like choose, but like if he really decided to kill Freya, he could do that, as he's done many times before with other gods, just as powerful, if not more so. But in this one, he was able to look at the subtext of the situation, and what you saw there was a person that not only understood her pain and acknowledged her pain, but had a tremendous amount of empathy in that moment, to the point that he would literally allow murder attempts and just try his best to disengage and kind of diffuse the situation rather than engage it physically, which is such an immense evolution to Kratos, which I don't think people talk about enough. I think a lot of people, obviously, it's like, oh, it's crazy that he didn't walk in and just immediately slaughter, Thor's whole family and all of them, like he would have done probably once upon a time. He probably just would have wiped them all out, and he's like, I'm not dealing with this. As you saw with the Greek pantheon. But with this one, he not only had this reluctance towards the warlike portion and getting involved in all this, which, I can appreciate this idea of him, despite having completely eviscerated the world he came from. He obviously does maintain to some degree this Greek identity, this idea of like, this is not really my world, it's not really my problems. And I can appreciate that to some degree. It's like, he still sees himself as an outsider, despite the fact that, he met a nice woman, settled down, had a kid, been in there for a while, and has, established this as his home. He still to some degree looks at himself as like an outsider, kind of stuck in this world now, and he's trying to make his way the best he can without getting too ingratiated, and he ends up being the most ingratiated person into this whole process. But I can appreciate the amount of restraint he showed, where not only did you see that with Freya, but also with Thor's daughter, whose name is escaping me right now. But, in that moment towards the very end there, he actually takes on a new ally who, in many ways, that was a dangerous game to play, bringing in someone that close that could have went left really quickly. But he showed a willingness to kind of trust Atreus. And that is the big thing. That I think is the development in Kratos' character, is not only getting to a point to show that restraint and to show that empathy, and also try to understand other people's perspectives, but at the same time also trust someone who is fundamentally different than them in the way that they approach different situations. And I think that's appreciative too, where it's like, take God of War 2 or God of War 3 Kratos and try to convince him not to, or to trust someone maybe associated closely with the Pantheon and work with them. Like, that's a tougher sell if it's not immediately in his best interest. Where in this one, he just had to trust Atreus. You have to keep in mind, he hadn't really met her up until that point, so there was nothing really. This is Thor's daughter, the guy who's been trying to rip his head off the whole time, and he actually had to show some trust and some faith in that moment. And I think that's like a big moment for him. And also, most of all, the thing that people are not really talking about, we saw Kratos lose for the first time. Thor whooped his ass. Let's not forget that he resuscitated Kratos. Kratos lost. Yeah. And that's one thing that I haven't seen anybody mention. This idea that's like, oh my god, Kratos beat this guy, or killed this guy, he killed all the, nobody can beat Kratos. No, Thor beat Kratos.
Yep.
Relatively easy. He killed Kratos, essentially, with a slash across his stomach. That's all that happened. And that is, I think, incredibly impressive. Because if you want to do power scaling, Kratos looks just as powerful, if not more powerful in this franchise, or in this chapter of the God of War franchise than the previous one. And Thor handled him, which tells you that Thor is probably the strongest force we've ever seen in this franchise, which is crazy to think. I wouldn't have thought that. You would have thought like Odin, but you have to keep in mind like Thor got caught slipping towards the end there, but on it when he decided to fight, and he wasn't ethically compromised by the fact that, hey, this is my father, and just outright killing my father is not an easy thing to just decide to do. When he's actually deciding to like fight, Kratos didn't really stand a chance, which is kind of crazy to really actually say. But if you really think about it, and I've actually rewatched that scene, like Kratos was going through it. Like that was not an easy thing. And yeah, he brings him back, and then he's like, all right, that's your blood debt. He slaps him on the butt and tells him to get going, clean yourself up, basically. That's crazy. That's crazy to see. So that's another thing why I love this story, is that you really, for the first time, actually see Kratos humbled. For the first time, where like he doesn't explicitly acknowledge it, but he has to some degree. You have to imagine that kind of also factored into his reluctance. Yeah. Where he's like, for the first time, I don't know if I can like win this. You know what I mean? Like if I decide to walk into, I forget what is the name of the world that Odin and all of them were at. I forget the name of it. It's not Midgar, obviously. That's Earth, but whatever that world was, that realm. Asgard? Yeah, Asgard. He's like, I mean, after that fight, you have to think to some degree Kratos was like, I don't know if I can just like waltz into Asgard like I did with the previous gods. I was like, he's like, I don't think he thought that would go well. And I think that's a very valid thing. So that's another thing I think that makes this story so interesting, is to see this incredibly powerful person be humbled in a way that I think narratively makes sense. We saw it play out, and it wasn't something that I necessarily ever thought I'd see in that way. To see just Kratos lose, and this is not the end of the game. This is damn near the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
They started the game with him getting laid out. And then from that point onwards, continuing, and then he gets different weaponry to deal with things. And in many ways, his combat skills actually increased. You could see the way it plays out with Heimdall and all that stuff like that, which was we'll get into that with characters and everything like that. A masterclass in combat choreography. I mean, that was awesome. But yeah, overall, the story I think really holds up. I think, and we'll get into it. How it compares to God of War 1. That is very debatable. I think that it entirely depends on what you're looking for. But yeah, overall, I think the story is an absolute success.
No, I agree.
And then we have, let's get into the gameplay now. This one is I think one of the more understated portions of the game where people don't talk about it as much. But this is a very well-designed game that introduced some really cool mechanics, some traversal mechanics. Feels really good, and also adds some new weaponry, which is really cool. That spear that you use, I think, is really, really fun, and is an excellent callback to kind of Kratos' origins. So I really like the gameplay. I've always loved the combat of the God of War series, even back in the day, and then kind of when they reinvented it with 2018, I thought they gave it a nice weight to it that I actually kind of want from a lot of other games. That like, for example, Horizon, I wish had more of a God of War weight to it, for example, where you can not only feel Kratos' power, but you also feel the impact on the enemies, and you see them react dynamically. And one thing that I hate is when you have a game that you're like slashing away, but the enemy's not fully reacting to it, aka Monster Hunter, basically. Where this game is the opposite of that, where I think it does a great job of giving you that power in that way. What do you think about the gameplay?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's such a refinement of something I was so good already. That's what I always say. That was always a big dilemma when you went from the original God of War trilogy, which is more hack and slash DMC style.
Yeah.
And then you get this, which is, tighter camera over the controls, limited to a heavy attack, weak attack, and on the base looks very simple. But when you think about it, what always stuck to me is what you had to do for different enemies. If you wanted, even though if one weapon was your favorite weapon, you had to keep it diverse. You had to switch from from the blades to the axe to later on having to use the spear, which again I also agree was a great throwback. Even Kratos says it. They're like, "Why are you so good with this already?" He's like, "This is the first thing we used as Spartans growing up. This is the first weapon," and which is historically accurate. It's the first weapon they learned to use. So when I found out that you got a spear, I was like, well, it makes sense. I'm surprised he hasn't had one before. It makes absolute sense. And it gets, just the small creativity with, 3 weapons. That's always one thing. And if you think about the original trilogy of God of War, he had tons of them. By the end of the game, every boss gave you a weapon or whatever it was. You had tons of them. You could swap through them really quickly, and it was fine. But there's no memorable combos you hit. In this one, you think about the stuff you had to pull off with, and we'll get into it. Heimdall, which one of my favorite characters. Scott Porter delivered on that character. But just the small combat having to do with that, where you can't land a hit. Kratos knows. He's like, I can't hit this guy. What am I supposed to do? And you find creative ways to use the spear, having things that he can't see ahead. To small combat later on when you're trying to recruit people for Ragnarok. And you're going through waves and waves of enemies sometimes, and you'll have to change it up. And I think that's what really stuck with me. Also, one thing that people I feel like also don't, it's because it's part of the gameplay, but it's not gameplay specifically that you're doing, is the partner relationship. I think it'll be probably a long time before I go back and play God of War 2018, but to have a partner who does so little in that one is going to be very interesting. I think in this one, when you first get Freya to play, and she's your, not sidekick, but she's the other character there instead of Atreus, I think it's really interesting to see her go with using the wings abilities, using all the Valkyrie abilities that she has to her weapons, so using some the plant stuff that she has. When you're Atreus, you're partnered up with Thor or Thrud, right? Thrud's their dog? No, Thrud is it.
Oh yeah, that's her name.
When you're partnered with her, they are powerhouses. How many times you're sitting there with arrows with Atreus, and Thor or Thrud comes and just with one big hit just knocks the enemies out, and I'm like, dang, what am I even doing here? They come and just clean house, and I think that's a really cool thing to do, in a world where it's not just shadow casted as, all right, now you always have to have a partner, so here's a partner. No, they feel different to have. I played significantly different when I had Freya with me, or if I had Atreus with me, or when I was Atreus, a little bit different when there's times where literally I was like, I left the guy, I turned the camera because I knew Thor was going to just wreck them, and I was like just trying to get through this section. So I think overall this gameplay is just something that it's going to be hard for them to keep refining because it's such a masterclass in gameplay, and it's a gameplay that we've seen before, hit with R1, hit heavy with R2. But it's very hard to get right in this world, and I think Santa Monica knows exactly how to do it, and they've done it twice.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect example of if it ain't broke, and then they kind of just refined and cleaned up, and it felt great in 2018. So that was one of the things that I said that, hey, if they just move that forward, no complaints here. And they found ways, I think, to kind of innovate on it without kind of sacrificing what made it great in the first time. And then one big thing is not only that I think do they have the right kind of feel for combat, but then also when you change weapons and as you said, it kind of encourages you to try different weapons on different enemy types. It also kind of fundamentally changes the flow of battle. When you're using the blades, there's this range that you have and this flowiness that's again very akin to the older games. You have the weightiness of the axe, but then once you have the spear, it's like this perfect middle zone for me, I think, where you have this damage, but versus you also have that kind of wave move where you kind of implant one of them in there and then you hit triangle or something like that and it explodes and stuff like that. So it actually gives you kind of this arrow range to kind of complement already what Atreus or Freya would be doing. Mm-hmm. And that's another thing where it's there's just everything's so well designed and works to so well to each other that you can kind of try out different things. And I remember I'd be aiming for feet if they have like shields and stuff like that, and it works really well. And yeah, so I think in terms of a gameplay perspective, you know, it feels good. Traversal, you know, this game has always had kind of like basic approaches to traversal, so like running and jumping and stuff like that have always been kind of like a backseat thing. And I think they're good enough. Like, is it the best feeling, you know, traversal or climbing ever? Not really. I'm still like very partial to like the Assassin's Creed franchise, for example. That's like where I like the climbing. This climbing is good enough. It doesn't bother me. Sometimes I think it's on the slow side. That's one critique I'd have in terms of gameplay. The climbing can be a little slow. But I mean, you know, Kratos not being the most agile guy in the world does not surprise me, so that I don't really, you know, beat him up on. But yeah, you know, overall I think gameplay really holds out, and the good thing about it is because the movements are so fluid and stuff like that, in terms of just the general kind of movement animations that Sony Santa Monica had set up, I think this game is going to also age very well. That's another thing. That I think this game is going to age tremendously over time, because the way that they design these animations to flow together, there's no jaggedness. And the great thing is when you have that power and that high frame rate, it's just such an organic, good feeling feel that I think going forward, it's gonna be an excellent game to go back to if anybody decides to do so. Now's the fun portion, the characters. A lot of them from the first one that kind of evolve, and then we have some new introductions, specifically through the Asgardians and stuff like that. Personally, you know, I'm also a big fan of Heimdall. I think the performance was great there. I've always had a real appreciation for Mimir and his just general line delivery. And what I like about Mimir in this game is that you also kind of learn of how much of an a-hole he was in life. He's just kind of like a terrible dude, and he obviously has like tremendous remorse about that. But because of his very obvious situation, there's not much he can really do about it outside of try to motivate his compatriots to try to help do it for him, essentially, and do right by others. I loved Mimir in this. I loved Freya's character arc, you know, for the point that she found forgiveness, because it was an interesting seeing that rage from Freya that was in many ways so valid. You know what I mean? Like, at no point do I necessarily feel that she was being irrational. In some ways, you could be like, okay, well, it might be in everybody's best interest to try to put this to the side as best as you can, at least for the time being. But I mean, you have to think about the perspective she was in. You know, like if you really like kind of like pay attention to the situation, this is obviously someone who's mad at Kratos, but most of all mad at herself that the situation kind of got to that point, and that she didn't get the chance to kind of fix that, in many ways, her own kind of issue. And you can see that kind of frustration in her with herself and with the world and with Kratos all together. And you know, misplaced aggression's a real thing. And in many ways, you don't even have to say that it's like misplaced, because I mean, technically, yeah, Kratos did kill her son. Like he really did. Despite however you feel, you know, there is that kind of sense of loyalty to the person you literally gave birth to. I think that's a completely valid thing. So I loved kind of Freya's arc where, you know, I knew as I was playing at some point she's probably going to forgive Kratos, probably. And I just was really hoping that they don't do it in a corny way, because this is a serious situation. I didn't want her to just be like, you know what, fine, you're right. Like, this ain't a fine, you're right type of situation. Like, Baldur's dead forever, so let's treat it as such. And I think they handled that with care. And so that's one of my big things, is additional to what I've kind of talked about previously with kind of Kratos's character arc. Most of all, and obviously Atreus kind of growing into his own man, I think Freya's arc is one of the more compelling things that really kind of like hit me hard. Just kind of seeing her kind of from where she, that immense kind of frantic pain that you see in the beginning, where like she throw everything out, like I'm killing everyone type thing, to the point where she has to not only come to terms with, you know, her son dying, but also her relationship with her brother, and how that impacts her relationship with Kratos going forward, and all of that. And also, obviously, her literal ex-husband and dealing with all of that. So, Freya had a lot to deal with, almost more than almost anybody in this game. So I really love the way that she was treated throughout this game, whereas she was very eyes on the prize, which I can appreciate, but at the same time was evolving as a person, which is cool to see these kind of like ancient beings that have existed for so long kind of actively in real time evolving and kind of taking in new information and trying to be the best version of themselves that they can be. What are your thoughts about the characters? What are your favorites and maybe least favorites as well?
Yeah, no, I think, everyone did just a fantastic job. We knew, the Sonny playing Atreus, we knew Christopher Judge playing Kratos was gonna do beautiful performances, but yeah. I think Freya is one that I liked. Freya in the first one, I just didn't think I would just like love her character so much in this one, just because, like you're saying, she went through so much, from losing her son to wanting to kill and get revenge to being to the point where she was revenge isn't going to do anything. And in a sense, she admitted too, she goes, I don't know if I could kill her. At one point Kratos says, it's like, well, what are you going to do next? Are you gonna, forgive me, or whatever the scene is?
Yeah.
And, forgive or kill me, and she's like, I can't do either, and that's fair. That's fair. She doesn't have to forgive him for killing his son, but she also knows, come on, you can't kill him. But yeah, then moving on to, and I completely forgot about her whole arc with her brother that she hasn't seen in so long.
Yeah. And
coming to not just justification, but sort of redemption and everything she did as wife to Odin, going through getting her weapons and going through, when you go through that area, it's like, oh yeah, this is where we had our vows and stuff, and she goes, I fooled myself thinking I was happy then. I was not happy then, and getting all that stuff is just really, really great. So that's one thing I enjoyed. Heimdall was obviously the other one that really got me just surprised, because I thought, all right, I knew very little of Heimdall. I know he's sort of in different versions of this mythology. He could predict the future. He can sense things. He's the whisper in Odin's ear. And I think this is one of the best ones best interpretations of that we've ever seen. To just immediately hate everything about him, but because you're supposed to, is a interesting concept. Like, you're not supposed to like Heimdall at all, but at the same time, he's just doing his job. Here comes Atreus, being held up as this golden boy. Heimdall saying from the beginning, hey, he's not a good guy. This is gonna be bad. This is gonna end up bad if you guys keep doing this. And what happens? You got death and everything that happens, and you have Ragnarok happen because of it. And he's just there like, I told you this. And even to the humble moment when he first gets, I think it's a scratch on his face when he's fighting Kratos with the spear, and he realizes that he can get hurt, and he was like, oh. Like, there's that expression on his face is priceless, because I still remember when he's like, oh no. And then you just continue to wipe the floor with him. So I think he was just really well done, and someone I knew not much about. Again, he's just one of those characters like, oh yeah, I know a version of Heimdall's in this game, but I didn't really think what else. Overall, I think everyone else did just really great job. I think the actress who played Angrboda did fantastic. Thor was obviously just exactly what I wanted this Thor to be. I think it's such a great, bold movement for them, because nowadays people hear Thor, they think Chris Hemsworth, they think the MCU Thor, and that's, let me tell you, everyone who's out there listening, that Thor is a Thor, but let me tell you that it's not the Thor. If you go read the legends and everything of the original Thor, you see this super drunken, there's that whole bar fight scene, and Thor stumbling, throwing up, puking everywhere. And that is a very definite version of Thor, especially when he's gone through what he's gone through at this point, losing his son, still trying to be so obedient and faithful and loyal to his father. You see his dynamic with his wife, which I don't remember, but
Sif.
Yeah, she, she has a small thing being like, she has such. I wish she was a little bit more upfront, because she had a small part, but her also in knowing what's going to happen and knowing the truth about Odin really push that, and there's that, it's like, I call it a cutscene, but there's a part where as a trace you can go outside of their room and you can hear them arguing, and they have this great dialogue. I just wish I could see it, because it sounds like they're having this huge argument, but you don't see it true performance being delivered, which is absolutely great. The only one, I guess, not my least favorite, and it's kind of a cop out because again, it ended up being a trick. I just didn't resonate too much with Tyr, either version of it. I know that, so the Tyr that you see throughout the whole game almost ends up obviously being Odin. And even when you get to the real Tyr later on, he's still kind of just not there. I know he's this sort of quote unquote retired God of War. I just would have wished it would have been cool to see a moment of true, listen, this is why it was called the God of War at one point. Just to see a version of God of War that wasn't Ares and Kratos. It would have been kind of cool to see that. I just think I understand that it probably wouldn't have fit in here at any time. I don't know how else you would have snapped this where that big reveal was. It's something I kind of caught on to slightly earlier that something was up with that. And obviously then it goes full front when Tyr starts calling him Loki right there, and that's when Brock picks up on it. So that's my only thing. It's just I get why they did what they did with Tyr. I just wish there was a moment, that big significant Tyr moment. Even if it was sort of, because you don't get to I don't think you get to real Tyr until post game content. I just wish there was still some sort of moment there, which would have been. But overall, what a fantastic cast of characters, and I'm gonna miss them because obviously some of these characters die. But and we'll get into obviously soon what we think where God of War goes from here. Some of these characters probably won't come along for the journey.
Yeah, and funnily enough, as you were talking to me, I was thinking about like some characters that I had like issues with, or maybe not issues. Yeah, Sif. I just wish we got more from her. She didn't really play any significant role until later. Everything was kind of like background. Like if you're paying attention, her dynamic in relation to her daughter and Thor. I wish we got more from Sif. She's a powerful player in her own right, and I feel like they maybe slept on her a little bit. So, hopefully, if they choose to move with her going forward, that we get a little bit more stuff from Sif. I doubt it. I think this is kind of going to be it for her. But that was one thing disappointing. I do not like the chipmunk dude. Whatever his name is by the tree.
I didn't do any of those missions.
Me neither, man.
I don't have time for that.
It's just I was getting tired of being screamed at every time I go to Sindri's house. And he's like, "Excuse me, Mr. Kratos. Like, can you help me?" No, I'm not doing it. Whatever weird mission you're sending me on, there's no way. So yeah, he was annoying as hell. And I didn't really care for him. And yeah, Heimdall, man, he killed it. And what I love about him is he's got this kind of like pretentious arrogance to him it perfectly encapsulates somebody who's never been touched before. Like, yeah, he carries himself like someone who, like, yeah, you can't touch me. I know your next move. And it's so hilarious that the moment he gets touched, all of that unwinds. And you could see how much that's kind of this privileged facade that he's had all this time, where it's like he's really a shallow, kind of insecure type of dude that immediately just can't hang and can't hold it together the moment that he faces significant pushback, because again, this is a guy who nobody's been able to land a punch on, and for the first time, not only has somebody landed a punch, but now my life might be at stake. And he's just as familiar with the Ragnarok stuff too, so he knows to some degree what he thought was an impossible is in play now, which was like, hey, I have to die to make all this happen. Well, I know damn well nobody's going to touch me, so I'm good. This is fine. And the fact that I'm like, oh man, like my death is probably going to happen now, that must have been a scary prospect for him. And his voice acting kind of at that point and his kind of character performance really kind of shows that perfectly. So I really loved seeing kind of Heimdall unwind in that way. And then lastly, for me, what I loved about Odin is that when you first kind of see him, he's this very reserved, kind of quiet, soft-spoken guy, which I really appreciated. He's so different than, like, for example, when you met Zeus for the first time, and he's this kind of, like, over-the-top, loud, powerful. Like, he carries himself in the way that you'd expect from a guy kind of leading this giant pantheon or group of gods, where Odin's very different than that. He's this more reserved plotting type where like you can't always know exactly what he's doing, and he'll never let you know. He's not the type to kind of like let all his plans out. And so it was really interesting to see an antagonist that is actively countering the narrative that he's an antagonist, which is what I love about Odin, where the entirety of the time he's trying to convince everybody that he is not a bad dude and that everything you've heard about him is not true. And, obviously, it walks like a duck, talks like a duck. Like, if everybody's saying that he's a piece of crap, you could assume that he is. But if you take just his words and what you immediately see, eventually you might even start to buy into it as a player, where it's like, okay, maybe he's not that bad, and maybe he really is just seeking knowledge, and maybe he's had some bad he's done some bad things as a younger god once upon a time, but maybe now he's just this old man that really wants to go on this journey and learn these things, and then you always see that he has these really sinister intentions that he kind of holds close to himself, holds close to the vest, that everybody else be damned. And then that is such an interesting portrayal of somebody. He's not this kind of overtly powerful guy. Now, towards the end, you can see what he's really capable of, and I liked seeing that. It was fun to finally get a glimpse of his power. But up until that point, he's just this dude that kind of moves around with his crows and flies around and deals with some logistical challenges and tries to diffuse situations and stuff like that. But he doesn't really come off like, okay, this is the guy, this is the big bad of this game, really. And then, towards the end, everything kind of emerges, and then you can finally see how, like, oh, this is what everybody's been talking about. This is what Freya's been talking about. And then, finally, Atreus kind of comes to realize that, even funnily enough, despite the fact that Atreus, when he goes to Asgard, is very clear of like, no, I'm using them. You can tell that to some degree, he probably bought into Odin's nonsense a little bit. Mm-hmm. And you can't blame him, because that's what Odin does. He deceives people. And you could see very much that, like, Loki buys into this, and there's eventually probably a point where he finds that, like, maybe if he plays ball with Odin for real, things will work out okay, and Kratos won't die, and all this stuff, because there's that whole storyline of, like, the prophecy of Kratos dying, and that was another big thing that I totally expected Kratos to die at the end of this game, and was very surprised that he did not. But yeah, overall in characterization, Odin's another one. Again, understated. Kind of a low-key kind of performance, but like masterfully done. Yeah. And now we can do a bit of a comparison. God of War 1, again, to kind of a modern masterpiece, if you will. And then they followed up and kind of stuck the landing with this one. So how do you think this one compares to the first one? Do you think it's better, just as good, worse? Like, what are your thoughts?
I think for the most part, it's on par. I talk about the sort of pacing issue I had with it, where I feel like in the first God of War, it's a slower build. I think the game starts very slow, and it builds, and it builds. Yes, there's that great fight in the beginning as well, but the rest of the game sort of slowly builds up to this, really exploring who these characters are with each other, where it's hard to compare that in a sequel. And in the sequel, it did, I think, stick the landing with who these are and who they ended up becoming and throughout the whole journey. So I think when you look at these two, I think the story was delivered better in the first one. I think there's a constant narrative there that crescendos, and there is an end. When you get up there and you finally, spread the ashes, it feels like an ending where, like I said, the way Ragnarok ends is with you beating Odin, and it's kind of like, I kept being confused. I was like, did we win? Did we beat Odin? It was a trick. Really, we just gonna smash his marble, and now he's truly dead. I was like, that was kind of it. There was no big, like, final sort of hit, which in God of War 2018 there is with that. What do you do? How do you kill? Do you crack his neck again or something like that? I don't remember how that.
How Odin dies?
No, not in 2018. How do you kill Freya's son?
Oh, I think you like snap his neck or something like that and throw him off the cliff.
Yeah, something
like that.
I don't. Anyway, I know at one point he does that, but anyway, I felt like there was a significant he's dead. And in this one, it's like I was preemptive, like, all right, where is he coming from? Is he gonna change? What are we gonna go with? And it's not, So again, it's hard comparing those two things because the way both games end, sort of leaving you right open into the post game content as well. And then once I saw the credits start rolling, you're walking down the hill. I got it. So that's where it's hard. It's like, man, when people say, like, which game did you like more? I'm like, I liked almost everything in the original God of War 2018. I can't recall what I really did and not like. Whereas in this one, that the first chapter with Atreus and Angrboda, and sort of the fizzle that was Ragnarok, sticks out to me. And not that I can recall were there two things like that in the first one. So just as good. I mean, the gameplay is they're so consistent between these games. That's why it's so hard to compare them, because it's like, man, it's almost one big experience now. Now that we know that the Norse mythology isn't a trilogy, it's going to just be these two games. It's just such a great package. What about you? How do you feel about it, comparing it to the first one?
Yeah, I've given a lot of thought to this point, and I would say overall, because there's a lot of sliders that make a game. Gameplay and characters, story, all the sliders. If I had to rate on all the sliders, God of War 1 will probably outscore Ragnarok, probably. So I think it edges it out. What Ragnarok has going for it, I think, is obviously all the themes that I spoke about earlier. And it has the benefit of closing out the character arcs that started in the first one, so it gets the payoffs. And that's the, I think, thing that kind of gives Ragnarok its edge, is the fact that, like, you get to see what the first game was building to. And what I mean specifically is, like, what Freya eventually becomes, what Kratos eventually becomes. You get to actually see what happens with Sindri, like in a real way. And I know we're off the character section, but the way they ended with Sindri is painful. It's tough. It's not an easy thing to swallow. The fact that, like, and another thing is, everybody who's hating on them for leaving Sindri upset, do you realize that he lost his brother and Ragnarok on the same day, guys? Like, relax. Like, cut him some slack. Like, because you got to keep in mind, like, so much of what he was doing was tied into his brother. You know what I mean? Like, so much of his reason to continue going was his brother. And again, it goes back to that idea of misplaced aggression. He's not really mad at Atreus specifically. He's mad at himself because he knew this was an inevitability. His brother was dead. Like, everybody knew that. And he knew this couldn't go forever. And so he blames Atreus for, like, getting him involved with all this stuff. But he knew that, what Atreus was doing was the right thing, and he would have gotten involved with the right thing. Because Sindri's not a bad guy, and he's just, it's misplaced aggression. It's misplaced frustration. And I like how they kind of left it on that. And so things like that is what I think give Ragnarok a little bit of an edge. But God of War 1, I think, is just a cleaner package altogether. Start to finish, setting up this world. It's a cleaner story in the way that, you start on a journey, they hit the mountaintops, they end the game. It gives a nice little, oh snap, his name is actually Loki. Thor shows up, and the game. You get some nice little cliffhangers, but overall, it's a cleaner package, start to finish. Where Ragnarok obviously is a lot more dependent on the events of the first one. It's paced a little bit more inconsistently. And in some ways, the climax of the first one, which is him reaching the mountain and this kind of emotional moment where he's finally sending off his wife, I think is marginally more impactful than the payoff of this game, which is kind of this destruction of Asgard type situation. I think it's a lot of fun to play through. I think it's a bigger event, but I think, I've always been a bigger fan of things that do more with less, if you will. And God of War 1, I think, just does a little bit more with less characters, less of a bigger scale. The scale of the first one's a little bit less because, again, this is not some world-ending thing. This is kind of the journey of a father and a son, and a guy who doesn't really know how to deal with his past and how to raise this young boy, and at the same time send off this wife who in many ways was the glue keeping all this together. And how does he continue forward? I think that narrative is really compelling and cleaner. So for me, I would say God of War 2018 probably edges it out a little bit, but Ragnarok is like right there. I don't think it's like this massive gap between the two. And what I like about that is that this one, I don't think too many people would necessarily disagree with that. This is not a Last of Us situation where it's like, I think Last of Us 1 and 2 are a lot closer, but like everybody else, like that's a contentious thing. Yeah. Where with like God of War 1 and Ragnarok, I love how close they are. And like I love that like some people would be like, nah, I think Ragnarok's better. And I wouldn't take issue with that. Or if they'd said 2018's better, I wouldn't. Now, if they said like God of War 3 is better, I don't know about all that. I don't know about all that. But yeah, overall, I think it's very close. But God of War 1 edges it out.
Absolutely.
And then to kind of wrap this whole podcast up, we have the future of the franchise. Where do we think this is going? So, just to kind of set us up, at the very ending, Atreus goes on his own journey. To kind of, I believe it's collect the giant balls. Is that what he's trying to do?
Yeah, I guess that's what he means. The Tales of the Giant's not done. So
yeah, so he's going into the whole Jotnar thing and trying to complete that whole situation. And you would imagine Angerboda is going to have like some degree of a part in that, as she's deeply embedded in that as well. And then you have Kratos, Mimir, and Freya kind of going on their own journey. You get this glimpse into another prophecy of seemingly, and this is I think other people did better analysis than I was able to glean just taking a quick look at that prophecy. It looked like there was like, I don't know if there's people worshiping him or something like that. Did you get what that was at the end there?
Yeah, it obviously shows because I think right before they talk about how they're gonna do what they can to try to help Asgard rebuild. And
exactly.
The realms are going to rebuild after everything Odin's done, and you see everyone. I hope they don't. They do look like they're praising the statue of Kratos. I think it's going to be less, because Kratos is not going to be the person who's going to be like, yeah, praise me. But I think that it's going to be more. He's going to be seen as a peaceful redeemer.
Yeah, like the liberator or something.
And that's what a lot of people sort of seems like. It's not that he's going to be worshipped as the god of the realms. Now he's not taking Odin's spot, but he's going to be held up as he's the man who freed us and did that as well. He's going to be looked upon as like a peaceful god, not always known as the murderer that he's always been seen as. That's how I took it anyway.
Yeah, and that was similar to the way I was thinking. So it makes you wonder, like, let's say he is seen going forward in some kind of distant timeline where he's like looked at as this freer of the subjugated, or like a liberator, if you will. Yeah, and it seems like his time at Asgard, at least for the short term, is done for now. Whatever outside the most immediate kind of helping rebuild, it makes me wonder, like, is this gonna build towards the role that Kratos goes into going forward, his next stage, where at first it was the kind of almost being of vengeance. And then you get this arc of him as a father, and now that his son is kind of on his own, finding bigger purpose outside of just vengeance and fatherhood. What does it mean? Like, what is Kratos going to do with the remainder of his time? Makes it wonder, like, is he going to go from place to place freeing people? It would be a massive kind of evolution in his character, because, again, you have to keep in mind, everything that happened with the Norse Saga was incredibly reluctant. He didn't want to get involved with any of that. Mm-hmm. So for him to basically willingly inject himself into a new situation, and it's like, I'm going to free all these people for the sake of freeing them, would be new. That's a new thing for him, because again, he didn't just kill the Greek pantheon of the goodness out of his heart. You know what I mean? He didn't kill Odin because Odin was a meanie. It's a means to an end a lot of the times. And not to say that Kratos is self-serving, but, like, he's never been motivated by pure morality before. That would be a new kind of chapter for him. So, what are your thoughts? Like, where do you think do you think, like, so the Norse Saga is done. Where do you think he's going next? And if you think he's going somewhere next, what do you think he's doing, per se, going forward?
I think because so we know the next one's not going to be in Norse mythology, and going off this prophecy that he's going to be seen as this freer redeemer, it's going to mean that this realm at least is going to get to a point where they're good. They're good again. They're set. I think it'll be it'll be a nice way that it's like this realm's now just going to keep existing. You don't have any of these, there's no Odins or anyone who's going to like take over and be evil. Which is a reverse of what happened in the trilogy where Kratos killed everybody, all the gods and everything like that. We don't know what that was left, and I think he's gonna be the way I sort of see it, or at least I theorize a possible way. He's gonna be like, you guys are good now. You don't need me. He doesn't want people to rely on him. He doesn't want to be that. They're gonna build this statue and see him, and he's like, though that's not what I want. It is what it is. You guys are now in charge of yourself, and I think that's why he'll want to distance himself. He doesn't want to be the ruler. He doesn't want to be the god of all realms. He doesn't want to be the all god. So he'll be like, all right, I think maybe I have to sort of disappear in a sense and translate into, I guess, the next mythology that they decide to do, which they have different options. They haven't teased at all. I mean, I think Eric Williams, who directed this one, I think in an interview was like, yeah, I mean, there's Celtic and there's this and Mayan and there's all these mythologies. He's not leaning one way. I think if I had to take a guess, or I guess it's less of a guess than what I want, I would like Egyptian mythology. I think it would make the most sense in the sense that, because God of War, at least I don't think God of War is going to keep going forever. In a sense, I don't, not at least with Kratos in a sense. And I think I thought the sort of looming nature of Kratos' death in this game I was like, this is either going to lead to him dying or it's not. And I think it's going to get to the point, though he is a god, he is, for the most part, almost immortal. These gods do end up dying in different ways. And, isn't he a demigod that was, if I remember in the original trilogy, he's a demigod who was blessed to the point to be a full god when he killed Ares. And so there's room to wiggle with what he would do eventually after a certain amount of time. And a big portion of Egyptian mythology is sort of life after death and current life and preparing for your next life. And so I feel like, theme-wise it could work. I think also I'd be curious to see what Santa Monica designs for some of these gods, because if you look at most Egyptian gods, they always have these huge headgears on. You think Anubis has the sort of dog head on, and there's the alligator head on. So there's like all these. I feel like it'd probably be pretty cool. I just hope it's just. I think environmental, I think, is where you start getting to some limitations, because you're gonna want something environmentally very different from the Norse mythology, which is these sprawling greens and ice. Basically, is what we experienced a lot of in 2018 and Ragnarok. And then I just don't want it to be a complete flip where it's just like, now it's just sand and hot and desert and oasis, and I just would like to see it. I think it would almost just make more sense to do Egyptian. And I think if you look back in like 2008, when all the directors were in, that's during the original trilogy, they always talked about wanting to do the Egyptian as well. I just feel like it would just aesthetically be so different from the other two sagas that would make sense. That's my only guess, though, is why they would go with that. Just the theme of death and living, and who knows what Atreus is gonna do after all this point, and who he will be as a person at that point. That's my only sort of guess into what they could do next.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think, judging by kind of the way they've spoke about it, Kratos' time in like the Norse world is pretty much done. But the reality is he has a son that is kind of inherently connected to it, being the god of mischief. And so it makes me wonder if the franchise at all could split or something like that. I've heard people kind of talk about this idea of like having the Atreus sections be their own thing.
Yeah.
In a smaller capacity. Because again, I just feel like it makes all the sense in the world for Kratos to jump into something new, having come from something else. It gets a little bit more challenging with Atreus and his journey. His journey's not complete. It's intrinsically tied into the world and the realms that they exist in now. You can't just drop Atreus into Egypt. You know what I mean? It gets a little bit more challenging there because again, like, you know, he is Kratos being what he is makes him kind of this god agnostic of like, yeah, he's tied to the Greek pantheon, but he wasn't a part of it. You know what I mean? In that way, where in some ways, like, you know, like Loki only holds relevance in the Norse realms. So, and then to see the fully realized version of that, I think requires some degree of connection to this older era of God of War, if you want. So I could totally see a situation where like maybe Kratos moves forward, but there's still somehow a way to kind of keep tabs with Atreus, and whether that's like a small spin-off game or something like that. And everybody obviously is talking about the rumor, you know, or not, it's not even rumored, but like they theorize about this idea of like the God of Mischief series, and it's the combat's a little different, and maybe you have like him and Angerboda doing their thing or whatever, and then maybe him kind of aging up and becoming a little bit more powerful in that regard. And I think that is really like a fun idea. I've always, you know, hearing that idea, I immediately thought of like what happens when Kratos is finally removed from that world, and the All-Father is gone, and that leaves Atreus to get more and more powerful. And what happens when effectively Atreus is a god amongst a world that is essentially godless now? Mm-hmm. What happens at that point? And what happens if theoretically he becomes somewhat antagonistic towards the characters that we like?
I had that theory too.
How could Kratos in the possible future have to deal with that? Like, how do you deal with a god out of control that you can't just kill? It's not that simple with it being your son, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Especially the son that we've played literally raising him. So I think that could be a fun idea for them to play with. The Egyptian one, I think, is the most organic place to go. I think it's the place where they've done Greek that had connection with Persia and all the Persian gods and stuff like that. We did the Norse ones. The Norse was a kind of a left turn, so that's why it makes me intrigued at the idea of maybe doing something like the Celtic gods and the occultic that kind of world. I think would be really fun. I love the idea of doing something Mesoamerican. That would be my preference personally, because I feel like that would be the sharpest of left turns if they could do it. Also, I love the ability for them to highlight gods that we might not know the most about, and learn about, and have them, not a clean slate, because obviously these are established cultures, but have the opportunity to really kind of build something new while simultaneously educating a lot of people on something. Where like the Kemetic gods, like, I know I've seen a lot of iterations of Ra and Anubis, you know what I mean, and all these and Tet and all these different Egyptian gods. So like I'd be super down for it. Like if they did like a teaser and they show Kratos in this, you know, the Egyptian desert. Okay, cool. I'm down to do it. But my preference would be to do something that I haven't really seen depicted before. And that's why I kind of lean more towards the Mesoamerican stuff, just because I haven't really seen that done too much at all. And I think there's amazing opportunity, especially I love the moments where you kind of get this resurgence of things. We kind of got like Valhalla and God of War all around the same time, and it was like an awesome time to kind of tap into that kind of all the Norse and Viking stuff. And how cool of it would it to be if they go down to like Mexico and do the Mesoamerican stuff at the same time where you're getting this kind of like Wakanda Forever kind of resurgence with Namor and stuff like that. I think that's also an opportunity to kind of feed off of that and kind of have a fun moment where they're getting some highlighted stuff as well. Also, a lot of other people, there are a lot of South African gods that they can tap into if they like. There are Asian pantheons that they haven't touched. China, Japan, Korea, that they haven't really touched. Vietnam, Thailand. So there's so much potential for them to kind of tap into different things that I'm actually really, really excited about. But I think Egypt is probably the most safe bet. Like, if somebody has to, like, put money down of what they're doing next, I would say go for Egypt. Like, that they've expressed interest in the past about it. It has the most well-known pantheon outside of what they've already covered. They can't really do Rome, really, because it's essentially rebranded Greece. You know what I mean? It's the same beings.
I don't think, it's the same beings. So it's just like a different translation almost.
Yeah, it's like they're different, but that's because the culture shifted IRL, not like from like if you have them going against, you know, like Mars, it's gonna be the Ares fight again. Like it's just we can't do that again. So that's the only reason why, like, once upon a time before the Norse saga, I would have said Rome makes the most sense. But that's because I didn't know there were like realm jumping like that. You know what I mean? So
keeping the same.
I think Egypt probably makes the most sense, but I would prefer for them to hit Mexico or like the Chinese gods. I think would be really, really fun too. It would just be such a visual left turn that I think might be weird. You know what I mean? Like, I think it just might look weird to have Kratos killing everything in China. That could be weird, but I also think it could be a lot of fun too, you know, with the dragons and stuff like that. So I think the best news of it all, despite all of our like speculation, is that the franchise is continuing, and that's the exciting thing. Is they have been pretty clear about the fact that this is not the end of God of War, which is awesome because I love that they've kind of breathed new life into this franchise that wasn't necessarily dead, but it was dormant for a while, and nobody really knew what they were going to do with it next. And when they came back, back with something so different, and in my opinion, so much better, that it makes me excited that they're super invested in it. I wonder if it'll be Sony Santa Monica forever. You know, obviously they'd probably want to do other things at some point. So I wonder, you know, I think it's entirely possible that we get like a God of War Ragnarok sequel in a new place done by Sony Santa Monica, and they might step away. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they like set up the next team to do the new era, but then they kind of step away.
Yeah, it's interesting to see because it's also that there's so many things we don't know. We don't know how big Sony Santa Monica is becoming.
That's
Chris
true.
Barlog is obviously directing a different game. They have a second game in the works. There was that time he was posting all that weird sci-fi stuff, and then and then so I whether it's that canceled sci-fi game that showed up in that God of War documentary or not, I think we see that whatever that is first before we come back to God of War, and I think rightfully so. I think this is a time you gotta take a breather. You know, we don't want another one, and then also it has to be done right. Like when like we were saying, think of the Celtic. You have to transform that to fit the narrative.
Exactly.
You know, same, and you want something different. You want something, you know, like you said, you think the first three God of Wars, you think these marble and clay pillars, and just that's what is that realm. And now, you know, when you think of the Norse mythology, you think of the open waters and the jungle, you know, not the jungles, but, you know, the sort of rainforesty areas to, obviously, a big part of it is ice covered areas, which makes it exciting to see what's the next sort of drastic, because it's got to be to the point where you think of whatever E3 or whatever it's going to be that they're going to show the next one. You know, what is it? You know, especially that's why I think it'd be curious to think. As much as I think it would go Egypt and it would make sense as Egypt, I think also like Mayans would be pretty cool to see because their gods are so different and colorful, and there's so many interpretations of like. And
they get busy with the war too. That's the big thing is that they're combative. So
combative. You think there's a lot of their stuff is in sort of prophecies and a lot of things, and that's when they also they're also just so chaotic in some of the stuff in a lot. And
they have an end of the world thing, just like Ragnarok.
They just like Ragnarok did. So it'd be interesting to see. It would also, you know, tie in with, you know, you have Atreus going full, doing whatever he's doing. Maybe there's some ties into that. Maybe he sparks something that, you know, there's options. That's the craziest thing is that there are options, and there's not really a way. Yeah, unless they decided to do Rome or something. You know, as long as they did not that, and
Yeah.
I don't think they would. I think there's not a bad option. If I see it's gonna be Mayan theme, I think, when you think Mayan, you think those big masks and all this crazy stuff.
Headpieces, yeah.
The headpieces, that would look so cool. In their interpretation of it would be fantastic. So I'm really excited to see what it is, but I'm also glad to take this break from it, and then who knows, PS6 jump back in to these characters, some of these characters.
Yeah, I hope they take their time. And another thing worth noting is, as of right now, Freya and Mimir are like with Kratos. So theoretically, wherever he go, they would have to either take them with him or make it make sense for them to stay behind. You know what I mean? And so there is also that component to take into effect. And it also makes me wonder, kind of to wrap it up, if we're going to have this, it seems like it's confirmed now, probably, or it's somewhat confirmed, that there's a good chance that we're going to have Kratos jumping to different realms. Like, this is not a crazy speculation. He went from, somehow he figured out how to get from Greece to the Norse situation, and he'll go somewhere else. Whether these exist on different entire planes of existence or how the dimension work, I don't know exactly. What I do speculate or am curious about is, what is all of this ultimately building to? Because I have a hard time believing that these are just these small little one-off events. I think the moment that they moved him to a new region, there was some kind, and they made it very clear with Ragnarok, there's something bigger at play here, and something that exists outside of all of this, whatever that may be. And so that is what I'm most curious about. How long does it take them to really address that? Like, are they going to really slow roll Assassin's Creed it with the Isu stuff, like, and have a million different generations over many different years to finally kind of drip feed you small little things here and there? Ragnarok was our first taste into it. That makes me wonder also, like, what are we going to do on a top level, and how does all of that climax? Obviously we have these climaxes per era, but it makes me wonder if we're going to get super crazy with it, and he's going to be jumping around a little bit more. Whether this next era is his last or not, I'm not sure. It makes me wonder, like, what is the ultimate climax of all this? Who is the antagonist above all of that? That is also what excites me. If like there is something out there that even Odin was trying to tap into, the most powerful theoretical being in this realm. And it makes me wonder, what is that realm, and do we ever access that, and what does that look like? So, I'm really excited about the future God of War. It's in a good place, and I just hope they take their time with it. That's like most of all. Just don't rush it. I think the 4-year cycle is a nice, comfortable amount of time to give it some breathing room, give you some time to play around, try things out, take some chances, get great performances out of these actors, and I think if 4 years from now is 2026, we're probably looking at tail end of the generation, if not maybe the very beginning of PS6, maybe 4 years from now. But I think that's even pushing it. It's probably going to be tail end of PS5. I think that would be a solid time. Either make it a launch game or close to or maybe a cross-gen game for next generation. Gives them enough time and can take advantage of better hardware too.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so that was our God of War Ragnarok thoughts. We both very much like this game, and I'm glad that they were able to kind of pull it off. I'm curious to see what our next spoiler cast will be. The slate's looking pretty dry right now for major releases, so it might be a bit before we have anything major to say about some of the upcoming games, but we're glad that you guys stuck this far into the podcast. And this is the NeoVintage podcast. I'm Jabrell, and I'm here with
Steve. Hope you guys enjoyed.
And we'll see you guys next time. Bye.